Hey y'all, Max here, and welcome back to episode 2 of the show with no name. Over the summer, two YouTubers that I watch very passionately made videos regarding what their most expensive and unique items in their collection were. I thought that was a cool idea, and I said, you know what, I might do that. I might do that at some point. But very recently, I had a friend who asked me how they track their collection, and I said, I don't personally use it, but I know a lot of people use price charting to do so. It's very easy to just plug in the items you have, and then it gives you a nice list of everything you have and the value of your collection and so on. And after I gave that advice, I said, maybe I should do the same. And so I did. So I took about a week, put everything I possibly could into price charting, and it was a nice little path down how much I've collected over the last few years, which was really cool to go back and, pick up some old games I picked up right in the beginning and remember where I got certain games from. So that was really fun. But now that I had price charting to tell me what the value of certain items were, I said, maybe I can actually do that video idea, at least for friends. So that's what I'm deciding to do right now. A couple rules I'm setting for myself in this video are, one, this isn't an opportunity for me to flex. What I'm about to talk about is kind of going to go hand in hand like some of the other rules I'm going to talk about, but I realized that a lot of the games that are really expensive in my collection are actually really unique ones and not ones that are quite obvious. So I thought it would be also a good opportunity to just talk about those games in general and sort of on that same wavelength, certain restrictions I had for what I would consider most expensive in my collection are the following. For one, I don't want to have any systems in this video. So technically my most expensive item is my OLED Switch. That's not that exciting, especially if I just walked up to here, show you my Switch OLED and said, here's my most expensive item. Anybody can get it right now. Everybody has a Switch. It's not that big of a deal. So I didn't put any systems in here because of the Switch OLED. The PS4 Pro is also up there, but the PS4 Pro is not really that relevant. It's just because it's a powerful system. So I don't have any systems in this video. The second one is that I don't have any Pokemon games in this video. I'm going to show a pair of Pokemon games regarding something about one of the games, but no Pokemon games. Everybody's familiar with Pokemon, and I didn't think it was all that exciting when I saw, 3 of my top 5 were Pokemon games, just games that have shot up because of the Pokemon boom. So I want to talk about games that are also unique at the same time. I wouldn't be explaining anything new regarding Pokemon. So I don't have any Pokemon in this video. The last rule is that I don't have any Japanese releases in this video. Technically, one of my most expensive items is just a random Yu-Gi-Oh game on the Game Boy Advance in Japanese. But sometimes price charting's algorithm goes a little haywire and those prices come out of absolutely nowhere. So for that reason, they're not super great when it comes to Japanese games. I'm choosing to omit any Japanese releases from this video. So with that said, let's get started. And the very first games I want to talk about is a game that I would consider my favorite game of all time, probably after Pokemon. And if it's not quite number 2, it is for sure in my top 5. My earliest memory of the game was going over to a friend's house just for some random Friday night in middle school or high school, and his parents had picked it up for him. They had gone to GameStop for some unknown reason, looked at the game, said, oh, that might be cool, and brought it home, and we played it that night. So the game itself is called Dokapon Kingdom, and more specifically, the PS2 version came out first in 2007. It was published by Atlas, and the Wii version came out afterwards, about a year later. So the Wii version is what we played growing up, and the PS2 version is what came to America first. So Dokapon Kingdom is really, really interesting. This specific game is a remake of a game called Dokapon 321, which is of the same nature. All the Dokapon games are really of the same nature, and the best way I could describe them is Mario Party mixed with Pokemon, mixed with Monopoly. It sounds kind of crazy. It is easily one of the most fun party games I could have ever conceived, and I've really enjoyed playing it, especially with the older memories I have. And there are times where I'll just pick up and start my own campaign, playing by myself against computers, and I've never finished a 999-week campaign. just for a little bit of reference, the quickest I could possibly do a week in the campaign is 6 minutes. So 1,000 weeks, 6 minutes, that's a lot of time to spend on a game. I've never finished that, but I get pretty far. I can get like 200 weeks in before I'm like, okay, I want to play something else. So Dokapon Kingdom is really cool. And specifically, I got both of these very early on in collecting. And at one point, I didn't get either of these when I would consider myself a collector. I remember the games, I bought them. So I don't really want to talk too much about value and what I paid for them and what they're worth now. In fact, this video, the items are not in order of how they appear in price charting. But I would still call them the first expensive games I ever had to buy because of just the nature of them. So Dokapon Kingdom is really cool for that reason. And just because it's also very close on the list. It's a little further down than Dokapon Kingdom, but Dokapon Journey for the DS is another expensive game that I own, and it's a lot of the same as what I could say about Dokapon Kingdom. Game style is a little bit different. It's based on a game called Kessen Dokapon 4 that I, for some reason, have 2 copies of. And just talking a little bit more about it, even though they're not worth a whole lot, I collected at least one version of every Dokapon game ever released. Most of them did not come to America. Dokapon Kingdom and Dokapon Journey and Dokapon Monster Hunter on Game Boy Advance are the only ones to come to North America. So I got at least one Japanese copy of all the other games. So that's really cool. It's a series I'm very fond of because of just Dokapon Kingdom. But I have played Dokapon 321. I played an English translation of it about a year ago. And it was interesting. It was an intriguing time. So that's the first game I wanted to talk about. My understanding is that Atlas games have a reputation of being somewhat hard to come by in some cases. And that's actually where the next game is. So the next game on the list is a game called Robopon. Specifically, this is Robopon Ring version. And the fact that I'm using the word version makes it sound like there's another one. And there is. This was a multi-release with a game called Robopon Cross version, both of which came out in 2001, also published by Atlas. So there's a theme here already that Atlas games are hard to come by. It's the last Atlas game I have in this video, because I don't really have a whole lot of Atlas games. But that sounds kind of weird that we have a game called Robopon that has multiple versions. It sounds a little something like this game series that popularized having multiple games in a series. So Robopon is described as a Pokemon-like, which is kind of funny because Robopon, Pokemon, you can kind of hear the difference right off the bat, and that's exactly what Robopon set out to do. Obviously a different game, and before Pokemon had really exploded, I mean, it did in 2001 already, but Robopon jumped on that bandwagon right on the early end of Pokemon's boom here in North America. So this is actually a sequel to games that were released in Japan and North America. Robopon Sun and Star were released in Japan for the Game Boy Color. Robopon Sun came to North America, just the single version, and then Robopon Moon was also released in Japan as sort of a update to Sun and Star. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it is. That's a lot what Pokemon Yellow is to Pokemon Red and Blue and Green. It's a lot of what Pokemon Crystal is to Pokemon Gold and Silver. And that example is probably a little bit more relevant because Robopon Sun and Star were released on the Game Boy Color along, in the same time period as Gold and Silver. So that's really interesting. So Robopon Ring and Cross were sequels, both of which came to North America, but those are the only games we've gotten since. So it's kind of interesting. I came across it very randomly one day when I was in New York, was not expecting to see it. I had heard about it on Did You Know Gaming, and I said, I gotta get that because it's really neat. And so I did. So it's a really cool piece to sort of see Pokemon's influence over time. It's also based on another game called Robotrek. I don't have the game sitting here for me to just show you. I have some things ready to go, but not all of them. Robotrek was a Super Nintendo game in 1994 released by Enix, now known as Square Enix. So that's just a little bit more contemporary information regarding Robopon. Moving on is a game released by Nintendo, published by Nintendo, and it is called Chibi Robo. This is a game that I got right at the height of collecting, when I really started to understand values of games and, sort of why they're expensive. And Chibi Robo is expensive. One, because it's on the GameCube and it didn't sell well, but two, it was mismanaged by Nintendo. So, Atlas games are kind of expensive because of their very small releases, and Chibi Robo is expensive because of how it was handled. So just for a little bit of information, it didn't receive a whole lot of marketing. It didn't receive a whole lot of information regarding its release in the States. So it kind of just happened. And because there was not a whole lot of info surrounding it, it's not, it wasn't marketed like games are today, it didn't sell well. And that's another theme you'll hear. Games that don't sell well tend to get expensive over time, unless they're just genuinely bad game and nobody wants them because there's hundreds of copies out there. So Chibi Robo, it's a adventure game that you run around and use the plug to fix things, which is kind of neat. But the mismanagement doesn't stop there. Going forward from Chibi Robo, because it didn't sell well, it didn't get quite the same love and passion that other Nintendo games did. We can name hundreds of other Nintendo games that have done a lot better. Just another example of something that was mismanaged in the Chibi Robo series was this game called Chibi Robo Park Patrol. Park Patrol is the sequel to Chibi Robo, and it was, for some unknown reason, released only at Walmart. I'm sorry, in the States, it was only distributed by Walmart. Walmart was apparently having some, going green marketing program at the time. So they wanted Park Patrol, because that's Chibi Robo Park Patrol, because that's what the premise of the game was, to clean up a park. So a game that didn't sell well in the first place was restricted to only a Walmart release when the sequel came out, so that didn't do well. And the most recent entry we've gotten was Chibi Robo Ziplash, that I don't have an American copy for because I don't have a 3DS, but I did come across this one when I bought a lot of Japanese games over the summer, and this one happens to be sealed. So, very weird series with, not a whole lot of story behind it, aside from just, this is a game that probably could have been very, very popular in North America if it were marketed correctly. Maybe if it came out today, maybe it would have been more popular because Nintendo knows how to market games now. But that's just an example. And because of how it was mismanaged and why it's so expensive now, it has become a Scott the Woz meme for those of you that are Scott the Woz fans. So that's kind of interesting. I remember when I came across this, I was like, I have to get that. And so I did. And one other random piece of information, because I forgot to mention it sitting right here, is that only in Japan, this GameCube game got a new play control release. So if this is unfamiliar, we got some of them in North America. For example, I think it was Pikmin and or Pikmin 2 got a new play control. Basically, playing Pikmin 2, I believe the GameCube's Mario Tennis was given a new play control game in North America. But this one, for Chibi Robo, to be able to play with motion controls, was only released in Japan. And this is another game I came across when I was buying Japanese games. So that's pretty neat. But yes, Chibi Robo, very, very interesting series to talk about. So moving forward is my most recent expensive game purchase. And it's a game I definitely heard about on Did You Know Gaming when they were talking about obscure PlayStation 2 games. And this game, very similar to Chibi Robo, had a super weird development cycle. So the game began development right around the beginning of the PS2's lifespan. And because the PS2 was still so new, and this is a developer that's not Sony or, buddy-buddy with Sony, they didn't have a whole lot of experience with the PS2. They had more experience with the PS1. So it was kind of a rough patch of trying to develop for the PS2. And for that reason, the game kept getting delayed until it was finally released as a GameStop exclusive in 2007 around a Valentine's Day, which that seems very specific until I tell you the premise of this game. So this game is called Julep. It's, like I said, it's my most recent. It came into the store not that long ago, so I really wanted to pick it up. This game is as weird gets. It was published by Natsume, and here's the premise. I'm reading it right from my iPad. The premise is a guy that moves, some guy just moves into a new town, and he moves next door to a girl that is the girl of his dreams. But because of his financial status, she wants nothing to do with him. So obviously that's a little heartbreaking and quite sad. But instead, he decides to write her a love letter. That love letter, whether or not it might have worked, we don't know, was lost. So the whole purpose of the game is for you to go around the town that you just moved into to collect the pieces of your love letter, but also to do tasks for people in the town so that they kiss you, and so you can give kisses, thus building your reputation. It sounds as crazy as I just said it was. The whole game revolves around kissing people and getting kisses from people and building your reputation so you can woo a girl that is, I mean, by the premise, it sounds like out of your league, but that's not the point. That's just such an odd premise for a game. Not that there's games in my collection that aren't odd. This one seems sufficiently odd that I really, really wanted to get it, and when it came to the store, I had to get it. So that's just kind of interesting. It's just weird, probably the weirdest game of the ones I'm showing today. But like I said, these are all a little bit unique in their own way. So that's cool. Moving forward, this is another interesting game, but a game that is probably a lot more common. Maybe not as common as some of these, but let me explain. This game is called Game & Wario, obviously by Nintendo, and released in 2013 on the Wii U. So Wii U, off the bat, for those of you that are unfamiliar, failed console, failed miserably. So naturally, Wii U games are very expensive. There are some games that are just very, very silly. There's a DreamWorks movie called Turbo that received a Wii U game, and because it's on the Wii U and because the system is now just obscure, it's like a $300 game about a DreamWorks movie. I wish my Shrek games were that expensive. I wish my Shark Tale games were that expensive. I wish my Madagascar games were expensive. But that's the idea behind the Wii U. Now, Game & Wario, it's, if you are unfamiliar, is a micro game, a collection of micro games. So micro games, as opposed to mini games, are basically mini games that are a lot shorter that you play in like rapid succession. So the first game I ever experienced like that was Warioware Smooth Moves for the Wii, where basically the main mode is you go in, you have 3 lives, and you need to complete these certain tasks within like a 3 to 5 second time span. And if you fail to do so, you lose a life. So you see how long you can go. And different from mini games, like I said, they're shorter. So if you can picture like Mario Party, where everybody takes their turn and then you play a collected mini game, this is more like single player, do a really, really fast task and figure out how to do it. So it's really interesting. The Wii U, obviously, it is unique because of the gamepad. So Game & Wario was actually originally supposed to be a tech demo for the Wii U that was supposed to come pre-installed. But because the game got bigger and bigger, not that it's a humongous game, it only has a certain amount of mini games, micro games, it ended up being sold separately. And that's just sort of what happened. The new tech demo that sort of became Game & Wario was Nintendo Land, where very simple games that you can use the gamepad to, motion controls, learn the joysticks, learn the new setup. But it's interesting that Game & Wario was supposed to be that. Specifically because we're talking about the value games, one thing I do want to disclose is that this is technically just a loose copy. The box is obviously original. It's blue. That's what Wii U games came in. This artwork is printed. So when I came across it the first time in person, I said, oh, I have to get that. And before I bought it, the guy was very, very transparent. And he said, just so you know, that is printed artwork. It's not real. So it's not technically complete. This is technically a loose copy. For one, I appreciate the guy being honest with me. But two, it goes to say how obscure this game is if it's technically a loose copy. And that's how I put it into price charting. And it's still in this video. So that's really interesting. But I don't want to drag this out too much longer, so I'm going to move on to the final item. If you were not quite able to tell, and that's fine, I started with Dokapon Kingdom because that's one of my favorite games of all time. And then all the other games I did sort of in oldest to newest order. Started with a GBA game, GameCube game, PS2 game, and then a Wii U game. But this item I had to save for last. It is, in fact, my most expensive item, and I don't know if I would have bought it had it not made its way into the store. I'm mildly breaking my rules of no systems because it's not a system, but it is the Donkey Kong 64 banana controller. So, if you can't see, there are little banana airbrush tips on the controller so that it is a banana. Released in promotion of Donkey Kong 64, this thing is a masterpiece. Back here, part of the wire's in a little blue bag. Let me explain the backstory behind this beautiful controller. It was released as a Nintendo Power write-in, basically. So, you had Nintendo Power is the magazine. You write into Nintendo Power, they send you one. Roughly less than 5,000 were ever released, ever distributed of the Donkey Kong 64 controller. And it was one of 3 controllers that did that. The other two were a gold. It was a gold N64 controller that said Nintendo Power 100, marking the 100th issue of Nintendo Power. And the other one was a silver Millennium 2000 controller that commemorated the year 2000. So it's a hard controller to come by because if you didn't write in, they didn't distribute it. And it's obviously just naturally a limited release for that reason. This one is in the way it was originally shipped by Nintendo. It's never been used. I tested it because I wanted to try it, but the person who owned it before me got it, threw it out of a box, and then sold it, and I had to get it because I love Donkey Kong Country to begin with, but Donkey Kong's funny, bananas are funny, and I just had to get it. Just look at that, banana tips. So, for the person that asked me, what is your most expensive item? There it is. But with that said, that's everything I wanted to show today. I have no idea how long this video has gone on for, but I hope you really enjoyed it. I enjoyed going through all the games again and just picking out games and doing a little bit more research about some of these. I learned some things when I was researching for this video, and I hope you found it interesting as well. So, don't know how to do outros, but have a great day.